Welcome back to the deep dive. If you're like most people navigating the modern mental health landscape, you've probably encountered a set of conditions that seem to, well, travel in packs. OCD, ADHD, and depression.
That's right.
Today, we are taking a monumental deep dive into what seems to be the unifying source of these patterns, which our research strongly suggests is complex trauma or CPTSD.
Exactly. And our mission today really is to give you a kind of radical new map. We want to move you away from thinking, okay, I have four separate problems, CPTSD, plus these three others,
Right.
and instead introduce the idea that you have one incredibly adaptive nervous system that learned multiple survival strategies because, well, the world felt unsafe for a really long time.
And crucially, we're going to frame those survival strategies using two opposing yet totally linked behavioral patterns, this pattern of clinging and the pattern of resisting. If we can get our heads around that, it really unlocks the blueprint for healing. It suggests this is all, fundamentally, one core wound showing up with many different faces throughout life.
Okay, let's unpack what we mean by complex trauma and these core patterns first.
Okay, first let's lay the foundation. When we talk about complex trauma, CPTSD, we're not usually talking about a single isolated event, like a car crash.
Right, not just one thing.
No. We're describing chronic, often repetitive, and frequently relational trauma, things that happen during those critical developmental times, childhood, adolescence.
And because it's chronic and often involves relationships, it's not just leaving a bad memory, is it?
Not at all. It fundamentally trains the entire nervous system. It basically sets the default operating mode to high alert.
So if that constant state of threat is the involuntary training program, then the nervous system gets really, really good at survival.
Exactly. It becomes an expert.
Yeah.
And its survival toolkit essentially has these two core strategies, seemingly opposite but deeply connected, clinging and resisting. Let's define those clearly. Clinging.
Clinging is that desperate, sometimes frantic, grasping. It's reaching for safety, for control, for certainty, anything really that might anchor the internal chaos or make the world feel predictable. This is the root of so many anxious and compulsive behaviors.
Yeah, grasping for safety. And resisting.
Resisting, on the other hand, is the active pushing away. Pushing away intolerable feelings, painful memories, maybe even pushing away reality itself, or just the sheer energy of being alive because engaging feels too dangerous, too overwhelming to process.
Wow.
And this resistance, when it finally exhausts the system, that often leads to collapse.
And these two patterns, clinging and resisting, they effectively become the brain's default operating system. It's almost like a huge faulty background program just running constantly, 247.
That's a great analogy.
Now, this isn't just psychological, is it? There's a massive physical toll from this constant activation needed for chronic clinging and resisting. This leads to that biochemical cascade we hear about, the thing linking these conditions.
Absolutely. The trauma essentially trains the HPA axis. That's the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the body's main stress regulator.
Right, the stress system.
And chronic stress means hormones like cortisol and adrenaline are just flooding the system constantly. Over time, this actually depletes the neurotransmitter systems we need for balance and regulation.
And what's really fascinating is how the specific dysregulation seems to map onto these secondary conditions we're talking about.
Yes, we see at least three crucial connections.
Yeah.
First, dopamine. It's essential for focus, motivation, that seeking behavior, reward.
Okay.
Chronic threat can seriously disrupt dopamine pathways. This can lead to that ADHD pattern of constantly seeking stimulation or novelty. It's almost like an attempt to self-medicate the feeling of threat or vigilance, or maybe artificially create a sense of predictable reward.
So seeking stimulation to feel okay. What's next?
Second, serotonin. This is key for regulating mood, sleep, feelings of safety, and well-being. Chronic cortisol over time just wears down this system. It depletes it, and that can lead directly to the kind of mood collapse we label depression.
Makes sense. And
Yeah.
finally, the anxiety and control patterns. That must be GABA.
That involves GABA, exactly, our primary calming or inhibitory neurotransmitter. Trauma exposure seems to diminish the system's ability to produce or utilize GABA effectively. Basically, the brain loses its natural brakes.
Ah.
And the result, you get intrusive looping thoughts, that feeling of being constantly revved up, hyperarousal, difficulty shutting off the internal noise, all critical parts of anxiety and very specifically OCD.
So it's like The system isn't just picking one defense strategy, it's throwing everything at the wall.
It really is. It's deploying everything simultaneously, which is a big reason why these conditions coexist so often. The system is trying control, that's the OCD, vigilance, the ADHD, and then eventual shutdown, the depression, sometimes all in the same day or even the same hour. It's this tangled web of symptoms.
An interconnected web, yeah.
Let's try to make that really concrete. Think about a single, probably quite relatable day for someone navigating this compound condition.
Yeah, walk us through that kind of blended scenario,
Yeah.
moment by moment. How does it play out?
Okay. So the day often kicks off with the ADHD pattern fully engaged. As soon as they wake up, the nervous system is instantly scanning for threats, pulled by every little sound, every potential stimulus.
Hyper alert from the get-go.
Totally. It's this desperate attempt to cling to vigilance because settling, focusing, that feels like vulnerability. So they struggle to pick the main task for the morning because their brain is prioritizing all potential threats equally. Maybe they open, 15 browser tabs at once, can't commit to just one.
I know that feeling.
Right. And this constant mental churn, the scanning, it just generates profound internal pressure and exhaustion.
So that clinging to vigilance, that scanning,
Mm-hmm.
it just wears them out by midday.
Exactly. By the afternoon, the system starts to feel overwhelmed, maybe even panicked, by the lack of control and focus that the ADHD pattern created, and this often triggers the OCD pattern.
Oh, okay. The switch.
Yeah. To try and manage the internal chaos from the hypervigilance, the brain clings desperately to a ritual or some controllable task. Maybe checking their email inbox compulsively 20 times, or reordering the bookshelf just so, or launching into a very specific cleaning routine.
Seeking that temporary relief of a contained problem.
Precisely. It offers a brief illusion of control in a world that feels out of control. But, as you said,
That level of effort, that intense focus on the ritual, it's completely unsustainable.
it is. So by evening, the chronic clinging, vigilance, then ritual, and
Yeah.
the constant resisting calm, resisting uncertainty have just fully depleted the system's resources. They just hit the wall.
Total exhaustion.
Total exhaustion. And the depression pattern emerges. It manifests as this profound emotional and physical drain. The brain basically concludes, look, I tried everything. I tried being vigilant, I tried controlling things, I tried seeking novelty, and I still don't feel safe.
Learned helplessness kicks in.
That's exactly it. Learned helplessness leads to collapse. And then, often at night, the whole cycle threatens to start over with CPTSD nightmares, where the brain is trying to process the entire stressful day while the body is just desperate for rest it can't fully achieve.
Wow. That visualization really makes it crystal clear. We're not looking at treating 3 or 4 separate illnesses here. We're just observing different defense mechanisms. Control, vigilance, shutdown, rotating within one single overloaded system.
And knowing those core patterns, the clinging and the resisting, lets us really dissect these secondary conditions more effectively. Let's start with OCD, when clinging becomes compulsion.
Yeah, we often think of OCD in simple terms like germs and hand washing, but you're saying it's fundamentally this extreme effort to control reality, both inside and out.
It really is the ultimate expression of clinging taken to an extreme. The traumatized brain learns, okay, the world is chaotic, unpredictable, dangerous. The only way I might possibly be safe is if I achieve perfect certainty or perfect control over certain variables.
So the obsession is the clinging.
The obsessive thought is the brain clinging desperately to a specific fear. What if I caused harm? What if I left the stove on? And the compulsion is the brain clinging to the temporary relief it gets by trying to neutralize that fear through an action, a ritual. That ritual grants the illusion of control.
And you mentioned purple level magical thinking earlier. Let's dig into that because that seems crucial for understanding why these compulsions feel so absolutely mandatory, non-negotiable.
Yes, the magical thinking aspect is key. It often arises because during early trauma, especially relational trauma, where maybe a caregiver or authority figure was the source of chaos, that figure felt like an all-powerful, unpredictable force, like a god whose actions were arbitrary and terrifying. As a child in that situation, you have no external power, so the only tool you have is internal. You start to believe deeply that your thoughts, your rituals, your specific actions must somehow control the external outcome. If I check the lock exactly 5 times, I create safety. If I don't pray in precisely this way, I am responsible for the bad thing that happens.
That's intense. That feeling of total responsibility combined with zero actual power.
It's a terrible bind, and it locks in the magical thinking.
So the OCD isn't just clinging to the ritual then, it's also an active resistance against something else.
Absolutely.
Oh,
It's simultaneously and quite fiercely resisting the fundamental reality of life, which is uncertainty. It resists the present moment by constantly projecting into a potential future catastrophe, and it violently resists that deeply uncomfortable, often intolerable feeling of just not knowing.
Which keeps the cycle going.
It fuels the vicious cycle. Trauma creates intolerable uncertainty. The brain clings to a ritual for a feeling of control. The anxiety briefly drops, which reinforces the ritual. The need for control escalates. And eventually, the person's entire life can shrink down, completely organized around avoiding uncertainty and performing these rigid routines. It's tragic.
Okay, let's shift to ADHD. When the system can't stop scanning, we've established this often looks like chronic hypervigilance. How does the dopamine system you mentioned earlier fuel this specific type of clinging and resistance?
Well, the primary clinging pattern we often see in trauma-related ADHD is clinging to stimulation. When that dopamine system is dysregulated, the brain is constantly hunting for a hit, a predictable reward, or maybe just intense stimulus, anything to cut through that internal fog or buzz of hypervigilance.
So calm feels bad.
Calm feels boring, yeah. And in a traumatized system, boring often gets coded as dangerous. Stillness feels terrifying, because stillness is where the unprocessed memory might surface, or stillness was when you missed the crucial threat signal back in childhood. So the system learns. Stay busy, stay stimulated, stay safe.
So the scattered attention isn't really a deficit of attention at all. It's more like an over-allocation of attention aimed constantly at survival scanning.
Precisely. That's a much better way to frame it. They're clinging to multiple focus points simultaneously because letting go of vigilance, focusing on just one thing, might mean missing the danger signal.
And the resistance pattern here.
The resistance is against single-pointed focus. Sitting down to just focus on one thing, like a spreadsheet, that feels like a dangerous luxury when your whole system is screaming to scan the perimeter for predators, metaphorically speaking. They resist calm states because, historically, those states might have been associated with helplessness or vulnerability, and they resist internal stillness because that's the vault where the trauma memories are stored.
It's no paradox then.
It's a tragic paradox, yeah. The system desperately craves peace, quiet, focus, but it simultaneously cannot tolerate the internal quiet required to actually find it. Focused attention feels like missing threats. Calm feels like vulnerability.
Okay, finally, let's look at depression. When resistance becomes collapse. Now, I want to push back a little here. You call it resistance, but depression often feels like the opposite, like total passive helplessness. How is it resistance?
That's a really important question. And you're right, it looks passive from the outside and feels like helplessness from the inside. But the collapse itself can be understood as the final, most extreme defensive mechanism. It's resistance achieved through complete shutdown.
Like an animal playing dead.
Exactly like an animal playing dead. It's resisting engagement with the perceived threat, which might just be life itself at this point, because previous engagement, trying to fight or flee, trying to control or be vigilant, only led to exhaustion or perceived failure. The system hits learned helplessness. It concludes, okay, nothing I do works. None of the clinging or resisting strategies keep me safe. The only defense left is total withdrawal.
So in that sense, the depression is resisting the life force itself.
Yeah.
Resisting engagement.
Yes, that's one way to see it. It becomes too dangerous to feel fully alive, too risky to feel hope or connection or even positive emotion, because the traumatized system is constantly anticipating the next blow, the next disappointment, the next pain. So resists those vulnerable states. That's extreme resistance.
And the link to clinging.
On the flip side, it can also be seen as collapsed clinging. The system clung so hard for so long to control, to vigilance, maybe to a specific outcome, that the regulatory muscle just failed. It gave out. The release isn't the piece of conscious, integrated letting go. It's despair. It's the system just throwing its hands up and saying, I quit. This whole game is too dangerous, too painful.
Okay, this is making so much sense. We've established the root is likely CPTSD, manifesting through these core patterns of clinging and resisting. But why do the symptoms look so radically different from person to person, or even in the same person at different times?
Yeah.
One person might be obsessed with following rules perfectly,
Like a blue level expression, yeah.
while another is completely driven by career success and metrics.
An orange level manifestation, exactly.
How do we understand that variation?
This is where introducing a developmental framework can be incredibly helpful. We can think of it like a developmental layer cake. using the spiral dynamics model, not rigidly, but as a useful conversational map. This framework helps us understand that when trauma happens, the survival strategies that result, the clinging and resisting, they get kind of encoded in the psychological language, the values, the worldview of whatever developmental stage we were primarily operating from at that time. Each stage processes safety, control, belonging, and threat differently.
Right, so the trauma response gets filtered through the lens of that stage. Can you give us a quick guide to the colors just so we have the map?
Sure. Think of the colors as sort of centers of gravity for psychological development. Beige is the most basic, instinctual survival, purely physiological needs. Purple is the world of the tribe, family, safety, and belonging, often with magical thinking. Red emerges with a focus on power, asserting the self, impulse, breaking free. Blue brings order, rules, morality, stability through tradition and conformity. Orange values achievement, strategy, rationality, success, progress. Green emphasizes connection, empathy, pluralism, sensitivity, community. And then yellow and turquoise represent more complex, integrated, systemic ways of thinking.
Okay, got it. So the trauma response, clinging or resisting, gets expressed using the language of whichever color filter was dominant when the wound occurred or became entrenched.
Precisely. Let's walk through it, starting at the absolute foundation, the beige level, survival, raw instinct.
How does OCD show up here?
At beige, any trauma response is purely physical, immediate survival. So OCD would be basic safety checking, repeatedly checking locks, windows, maybe hoarding essential supplies. It's driven by raw, nonverbal physical terror. The underlying thought is something like, must verify physical safety right now or I will die. Healing here is about achieving fundamental body safety, grounding in the present moment physically.
Makes sense. And ADHD at beige. Maximum hypervigilance, I imagine.
Primal vigilance, exactly. The body literally cannot settle. Attention is scattered physically, constant fidgeting, pacing, jumping at sounds, unable to rest or be still. The thought processes: must watch everything, always. Danger is imminent and everywhere. Healing involves the body learning it can settle, that rest is possible. The integrated state isn't losing alertness, it's the nervous system learning to consciously toggle between alert and rest instead of being stuck on.
And beige depression. Sounds bleak.
It's biological shutdown. The body is conserving every last scrap of energy. Often see inability to eat, move. Basic self-care goes out the window. The underlying feeling is, I'm too exhausted to even try to survive. Healing has to start with reconnecting to that basic life force through simple physiological inputs, maybe just a sip of broth, gentle assisted movement, basic hygiene. Very fundamental.
Okay, moving up the spiral to the purple level, tribal magical. This is where relational dynamics really start to come in, right? Safety through belonging.
Yes, and this is a huge source for many trauma-related OCD patterns. This is where that magical thinking becomes really prominent. The symptom often involves a feeling of magical responsibility for the safety or well-being of the tribe, the family.
How so?
The person thinks, if I don't perform this specific ritual perfectly, my mother will get sick, or if I step on a crack, I'll bring bad luck to my family. The compulsion is this desperate attempt to cling to the illusion that their actions can magically control the fate of loved ones.
Can you give a concrete example of purple OCD?
Sure. Imagine a child whose parents fight constantly. They might develop a ritual of arranging their toys in a perfect line every night, believing deep down, if I get this exactly right, mom and dad won't fight tomorrow. The anxiety about the uncontrollable family chaos gets channeled into controlling the toys. Healing involves helping them separate their personal anxiety from the actual fate or actions of the tribe or family members, seeing the boundary.
Okay. And purple ADHD, how does that tribal focus affect attention?
This often looks like overwhelming, scattered attention, but it's focused entirely on group harmony. The person is constantly scanning the emotional field of others, tracking every mood shift, every unspoken need, every subtle conflict in the family or group.
Wow, that sounds exhausting.
It is. They feel responsible for managing the entire emotional ecosystem. So they're scattered by everyone else's feelings, unable to focus on their own needs, their own tasks, because they're constantly trying to anticipate and smooth over potential disruptions in the group. Healing requires learning to distinguish their own emotional energy and needs from those of the tribe, building those internal boundaries.
And purple depression then gets internalized as a kind of magical guilt.
Yes, exactly. They feel like they are cursed or inherently flawed or just bad luck for the tribe. I'm the problem. They might isolate themselves, believing they need to protect others from their own contamination or badness. The thought might be, if I just disappear, everyone else will be safer and happier. Healing involves releasing that sense of conditional worthiness, dismantling the magical belief that their very existence is harmful.
Heavy stuff. Yeah. Okay, next level up. The red level, power impulsive. This stage is more about self-assertion, raw energy, breaking free from constraints.
Right. Red energy is about power, dominance, action, impulse. So, red OCD often morphs into an aggressive need for control over the immediate environment or the people in it. The thinking shifts to something like, I must control everything and everyone around me or it will be dominated and unsafe.
So less about magical protection, more about direct control.
Yes, this can manifest as intense micromanaging of partners, children, employees, or needing the physical environment to be exactly a certain way. And often there's extreme rage or irritability when their specific order isn't followed, because that feels like a direct threat to their safety through control. The compulsion is to enforce their will. Healing here is about finding healthy assertiveness, personal power, without needing to dominate others.
How does that raw, assertive red energy affect ADHD?
This is where we often see peak fight-or-flight activation manifesting as extreme impulsivity. It's that strike first, think later energy. This can look like high-risk behaviors, aggressive driving, impulsive spending sprees, maybe lashing out verbally or even physically with little provocation. The brain is clinging to action as a way to discharge the intense internal energy and anxiety. They are resisting stillness, reflection, pausing at all costs.
So the healing path.
Healing involves learning to channel that potent, fiery warrior energy constructively, maybe through intense physical activity like martial arts or competitive sports, or passionate advocacy, finding healthy outlets rather than letting it be purely reactive and destructive.
And red depression follows that theme, the collapse of the warrior.
It's often experienced as defeated warrior shame. The person feels profoundly weak, ineffective, like a failure or a coward, because they couldn't win or assert themselves effectively against perceived threats or life challenges. The aggression, unable to be expressed outwards, gets turned completely inward. I'm pathetic. I couldn't even fight back. I failed. Healing involves gently rekindling that healthy fire, maybe through tiny acts of self-assertion, rediscovering their strength without needing it to be about domination.
Okay, moving into the blue level, traditional order. This is driven more by external rules, morality, fitting in.
Exactly. Blue is about stability through structure, rules, shared beliefs, and tradition. So blue OCD is where we often see that rigid adherence to rules and routines becoming extreme. There's often a moral terror about imperfection.
So it's not just about safety, but about being good.
Yes. They're clinging to external structure as a substitute for internal safety and worthiness. The underlying thought is often, I must follow these rules, whether they're religious, family rules, societal norms, absolutely perfectly. If I deviate even slightly, I am fundamentally bad and deserve punishment or exclusion. Healing requires finding flexibility within structure, recognizing that life demands adaptation, not just rigid adherence.
For someone with ADHD traits operating at this blue level, the feeling of constantly failing to meet those rigid external standards must create immense shame.
Oh, it's excruciating. They desperately want to conform, to follow the rules, to meet expectations, but their neurobiology makes it incredibly difficult, so they internalize the message, I am defective, why can't I just be normal? Why can't I follow the instructions like everyone else? They resist the very system they crave acceptance from.
Healing path there.
Healing is huge here. It's about recognizing they are not defective, but neurologically different. It involves finding their own way to create functional systems and order that work for them, rather than constantly trying and failing to force themselves into rigid, one-size-fits-all, societal or familial molds. Self-acceptance is key.
And blue depression, following the theme of rules and morality.
This often manifests as a deep existential unworthiness based on perceived failure to meet the standards of authority, whether that's God, country, family tradition, the boss. Rigid self-punishment is common, fueled by this powerful moral belief that they deserve to suffer for their perceived shortcomings or transgressions against the code. Healing involves expanding their definition of good, finding self-compassion, and accepting that human fallibility isn't necessarily a moral catastrophe.
Okay, climbing higher. The orange level, achievement strategic. This is all about success, rationality, efficiency, progress.
Yes, orange values competence, achieving goals, strategic thinking, making things happen. So orange OCD often looks like obsessive productivity and efficiency. The person is clinging to achievement as their primary source of identity and worth.
So the anxiety isn't about breaking rules, but about inefficiency.
Exactly. The driving anxiety is about not being productive enough, not optimizing enough, not meeting the metric. I must achieve this goal, perfect this presentation, hit this sales target, or I am fundamentally worthless. They might compulsively check performance metrics, rewrite emails, endlessly striving for perfection, resisting the feeling that good enough is ever actually sufficient.
What's the healing there?
Healing involves discovering inherent self-worth outside of external achievements and metrics. It's recognizing that the relentless drive for perfection is often a trauma response, fear of failure criticism, that ironically kills true long-term efficiency and well-being, learning to value rest and process.
And the classic orange ADHD picture, that frantic multitasking pace.
That's often the fear of missing out, or FOMO, dialed up to 11 and translated into constant action. It's the frantic pacing, starting 100 projects at once, having, 47 browser tabs open. They're clinging to potential future success and resisting any kind of slowdown, because slowing down might mean missing a crucial opportunity or falling behind the competition. The thought is, if I stop moving, I'll fail.
How do you heal that?
Healing requires developing strategic focus, learning to prioritize quality over sheer quantity of pursuits, making conscious choices about where to direct that intense energy rather than scattering it everywhere out of anxiety.
And orange depression logically follows when that drive for achievement feels thwarted.
Yes. It's often characterized by a profound hopelessness about ever succeeding in the competitive game of life, as defined by orange values. A deep resignation. I've tried, I've hustled, and I've failed. I lack what it takes. They might give up on all goals, believing they're fundamentally incapable of competing or achieving meaningful success. Healing involves fundamentally redefining what success and a meaningful life look like, often moving beyond purely external markers.
Okay, almost there. The green level, pluralistic sensitive. This is about connection, empathy, community, social justice.
Yes, green values deep connection, understanding diverse perspectives, collective well-being, sensitivity to suffering. So green OCD can manifest as compulsive helping or emotional merging.
Compulsive helping.
Yeah, feeling overwhelmed by the world's suffering and feeling an intense compulsive need to fix it all perfectly. They might feel responsible for everyone's emotional state. This involves clinging tightly to the role of the rescuer or helper and intensely resisting personal boundaries, because setting a boundary feels like abandoning someone or being morally culpable for their pain.
Healing must involve boundaries then.
Absolutely. Finding sustainable boundaries and compassion, learning they can care deeply and contribute meaningfully without collapsing into codependence or burning out from trying to carry everyone else's burdens.
Green ADHD sounds potentially overwhelming too, being scattered by collective emotions.
It really can be. At this level, the hypervigilance can tune into the emotional or social field of the collective, constantly scanning for injustice, pain, or discord in the wider community or world. They can get lost in others' experiences, feeling scattered because they think, I have to feel everyone's everything, understand every perspective fully. Maintaining a solid sense of self amidst that sea of empathy is the challenge.
How do they heal?
Healing involves learning to maintain their own center while feeling that deep empathy, acting as a clear, grounded channel for compassion, rather than becoming a sponge that just absorbs everything indiscriminately, learning to filter and focus their contribution.
And green depression logically follows as being paralyzed by all that empathy.
Precisely. This is when the sheer weight of collective grief or global suffering becomes overwhelming, paralyzing. The person feels the world's pain is just too much. I can't bear witness anymore. Nothing I do matters anyway. The system shuts down, resisting positive action because any individual effort feels hopelessly futile against the scale of the problems. Healing requires learning to titrate the collective pain, acknowledging they can hold some of the suffering, witness some of it, but not all of it all at once. Finding meaning and agency in smaller, localized acts of contribution rather than being crushed by the whole picture.
Wow. This developmental layer cake model really highlights the sheer complexity. You could genuinely be struggling with, say, red-level impulsive anger towards a demanding boss, while simultaneously feeling intense blue-level moral shame about procrastinating on a report, which then leads to green-level depressive paralysis because the whole system feels unfair and overwhelming. It's all happening in one person, just filtered through these different layers of survival programming learned over time.
Exactly. And the real utility of seeing it this way is recognizing that the emotional language or the value system embedded in the compulsion for OCD or the hyperfocused distraction for ADHD often reveals the developmental layer where that particular survival strategy got stuck or encoded.
Right. So if you only treat the surface symptom.
You might miss the root. For example, if you only treat the blue level rule following anxiety by giving someone even more rigid time management rules, you completely fail to address the underlying, maybe purple level, fear of disappointing the tribe, their family or team, that's actually driving the deeper anxiety. You need to match the intervention to the layer where the wound lives.
Okay, we need to briefly touch on the more complex later stages. Yellow, integral systems, and turquoise, holistic unity. How might these patterns show up there?
Well, at yellow, the challenge often becomes complexity itself. Yellow OCD might look like obsessive system building or map making, a desperate anxiety about missing crucial connections or failing to integrate all the data perfectly. The compulsion is to achieve complete conceptual certainty in a complex world.
And yellow ADHD.
Could be scattered by the infinite connections, jumping frenetically between different complex frameworks, theories, models. Everything connects to everything. I have to grasp and articulate the whole system right now, leading to overwhelm and difficulty grounding in practical action.
And turquoise, the level of unity consciousness.
This is more subtle. Here, OCD could manifest as anxiety about falling from grace or losing spiritual awakening, maybe obsessive spiritual practices aimed at maintaining perfect energetic alignment or flawless unity. ADHD might look like being overwhelmed by cosmic consciousness, finding it hard to ground in the mundane, feeling like the physical body or daily tasks are somehow unreal or meaningless. And depression at this level could be a kind of cosmic nihilism. If it's all one in form as illusion, why bother participating in this human drama?
Fascinating. So the healing at these levels.
Ultimately involves integrating the vastness with the specific, fully embodying the human experience as the expression of the infinite, recognizing the sacredness in both the boundless unity and the particular finite, messy details of everyday life, grounding the insights. Okay, so this deep dive into the patterns, the layers, it all leads us to a really crucial point supported by research. Since these conditions seem so deeply linked by a single root in complex trauma, the most effective, long-lasting healing tends to happen when we prioritize treating the trauma first, rather than just chasing the secondary symptoms individually.
Right. Go upstream to the source. And what does the data actually tell us about how well this integrated approach works? Does treating the CPTSD actually help the OCD, ADHD, and depression?
The statistics are really quite compelling. There was a significant meta-analysis, for instance, that showed trauma-focused therapies reduced OCD symptoms by an average of 48%. That's huge.
Wow, nearly half.
Yeah. And similarly, resolving underlying trauma has been shown to improve ADHD symptoms, things like focus, impulsivity, emotional regulation, by anywhere from 35% to 60%. It strongly suggests that as the core nervous system settles down, the need for that constant hypervigilance and desperate stimulation seeking naturally diminishes.
Okay, that's powerful evidence. So let's get practical. What are some of the key evidence-based approaches that work on this integrated level? Start with the cognitive one, cognitive processing therapy, or CPT.
Okay. CPT is a highly structured, usually 12-session protocol. It's specifically designed to address the underlying trauma-driven thinking patterns, those cognitive distortions that keep the trauma feeling alive and present. It helps people identify and challenge what CPT calls stuck points.
Step one.
Yeah, those extreme, rigid beliefs born from trauma that just keep tripping you up, like, I can't trust anyone, or I am permanently damaged, or it was all my fault. CPT helps you develop more balanced, realistic beliefs based on your present reality. And the evidence is strong. Clinical trials show around 71% of participants no longer meet the criteria for PTSD after CPT.
That's impressive. And critically for our discussion, how does it impact the other conditions?
That's the key point. It ripples out. Those same studies show an average 52% reduction in depression scores alongside the PTSD improvement, and about a 40% reduction in compulsive behaviors like those seen in OCD. Changing the core trauma beliefs impacts everything downstream.
Okay, so it works. What's a practical CPT-inspired tool someone listening could maybe start experimenting with to begin challenging those stuck points?
A really useful exercise is the daily written impact statement. You start by identifying a specific stuck point that feels active for you. Maybe an OCD-driven belief like, if I make even a small mistake, I am a total failure and something terrible will inevitably happen. Then you deliberately write down the evidence you can find for that extreme belief. And then, crucially, you write down all the evidence you can find against it, specifically from your present-day life and capabilities. The goal isn't to invalidate the past fear, but to create a more balanced, present-focused belief. Something like, okay, while mistakes definitely feel uncomfortable, I know now that I am capable of handling discomfort, and making a reasonable effort is usually sufficient. Disaster doesn't always follow. It directly challenges that clinging to absolute certainty or perfection.
That sounds very concrete and doable. Okay, let's shift gears to a more somatic, body-based approach. EMDR, or eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. How does that fit in?
EMDR works on the principle of helping the brain process and integrate traumatic memories that have gotten stuck. When a memory is stuck, it stays locked in the emotional reactive part of the brain, the amygdala, and keeps getting triggered. EMDR aims to help move that memory to the narrative, contextualizing part of the brain, the cortex, so it feels like something that happened in the past rather than something happening now.
And the bilateral stimulation, the eye movements or tapping, how does that help?
The theory is that the bilateral stimulation, alternating left-right eye movements, taps, or sounds, mimics the natural processing that occurs during REM sleep, helping the brain digest and file away the disturbing material. And again, the results are significant. We see PTSD remission rates often cited around 77%.
And the impact on the other conditions?
Consistently positive. Studies show around a 68% reduction in comorbid conditions alongside PTSD treatment with EMDR. And notably, for ADHD symptoms, some studies report up to 60% improvement, which strongly suggests EMDR's power in calming that hypervigilant, overactivated nervous system.
Okay. Now, full EMDR requires a trained therapist. But is there a safe self-practice tool inspired by EMDR that listeners could use for maybe immediate regulation when feeling overwhelmed?
Yes, a really helpful one is the modified butterfly hug. It's simple. You cross your arms over your chest so your hands rest on your opposite shoulders or upper arms. Then you just alternate gently tapping left shoulder, left, right at a slow, soothing pace, maybe about 1 tap per second.
Okay.
You can use this while noticing a mild stressor or feeling an OCD urge coming on, or just when that internal buzz of ADHD overwhelm feels too loud. This gentle bilateral input seems to help calm the amygdala directly. Consistent use during moments of activation can reduce acute distress significantly, often reported around 45% reduction. It's a great grounding tool.
That sounds really accessible. Okay, shifting now towards awareness and presence. Mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR. How does mindfulness interrupt these clinging and resisting patterns?
The core idea of MBSR and mindfulness in general is to intentionally interrupt the brain's automatic habitual reactions, which in this case are clinging and resisting, by bringing non-judgmental awareness to the present moment. What's happening right now before the story or the reaction kicks in.
So, noticing the urge without immediately acting on it?
Exactly. Or noticing the scattered thoughts without getting swept away. The standard 8-week MBSR program has shown really good results. Around a 58% reduction in PTSD symptoms, a very significant 63% reduction in the Yale-Brown OCD scale scores, and impressively, 78% of participants with ADHD reported improved focus and attention regulation. The attention training inherent in mindfulness directly counteracts that scattered vigilance of ADHD.
Is there one core practice from MBSR that really targets this intersection of conditions?
A cornerstone practice, and one that's very portable, is the 3-minute breathing space. It's designed to be used multiple times a day, especially when you feel caught in a difficult thought loop or emotion. It takes just 3 minutes and disrupts that automatic cycle.
Okay, what are the steps?
Simple. Step 1, notice. Just acknowledge what's here right now. Thoughts, feelings, body sensations without judgment. Just awareness. Step 2, gather. Gently narrow the focus of your attention entirely onto the physical sensations of your breath, wherever you feel it most clearly. Step 3, expand. Widen your awareness again, out to include the whole body, feeling your posture, your feet on the floor, grounding yourself in this present moment.
Notice, gather, expand.
Exactly. And research on using just this simple technique, say 3 times a day for 6 weeks, has shown a predictable average symptom reduction of around 34% across PTSD, anxiety, and depressive symptoms. It works because it forces a conscious pause on that immediate impulse to cling or resist.
Fantastic. Okay, one more major therapeutic approach. Dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT skills. This was originally designed for complex emotional dysregulation, right?
Yes. DBT was specifically developed for individuals struggling with intense emotional swings, impulsivity, and relationship difficulties, often stemming from complex trauma backgrounds. It places a strong emphasis on 4 key skill modules: mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotion regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness.
How effective is it for this cluster of conditions?
Very effective. Studies show significant improvements, like a 56% average improvement in measures of emotional regulation. And because it directly teaches skills for managing overwhelm and impulsivity, it's proving highly beneficial for handling the simultaneous challenges of CPTSD, OCD urges, ADHD impulsivity, and depressive lows. It gives concrete tools for moments of crisis.
Let's talk about those crisis tools. What's the main DBT technique for quickly calming down an intense emotional spike?
That would be the TIPP technique. It's an acronym designed for rapid physiological change to bring down extreme emotional intensity fast.
TIPP, what does it stand for?
T is for temperature, like specifically using cold water. Splashing ice cold water on your face or even just holding ice packs on your wrists or neck triggers the mammalian dive reflex. This instantly slows your heart rate and breathing, pulling blood flow towards your core. It's a powerful physiological reset button for panic.
Wow. Okay, T is temperature,
I is for intense exercise. Doing something physically intense for a very short burst, like sprinting on the spot, doing jumping jacks, push-ups, helps burn off the intense fight-or-flight energy, adrenaline, cortisol that floods your system during high distress. P is for paced breathing. Slowing your breath down significantly, making the exhale much longer than the inhale. For example, breathe in for 4 seconds, hold briefly, breathe out slowly for 8 seconds. This directly activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the body's calming response.
In the final P.
The second P is for paired muscle relaxation. Systematically tensing and then releasing different muscle groups in your body. This contrast helps release physical tension associated with the intense emotion. Using the full PIPP sequence can be incredibly effective. Studies show around 89% of people report an immediate reduction in crisis-level symptoms when they use it properly.
That's a powerful toolkit for emergencies. But what about when the distress isn't a full-blown crisis, but it's still overwhelming, and you feel that urge to resort to the old patterns, the compulsion, the avoidance, the shutdown?
That's where the DBT distress tolerance skills come in, particularly the ACCEP acronym. This isn't about making the feeling go away instantly, but about finding ways to tolerate it, to ride the wave without making things worse through impulsive or compulsive actions.
Okay, ACCEP. Break it down for us.
Sure. A is for activities. Engage in a healthy, distracting activity you enjoy. C is for contributing. Do something helpful for someone else, shifting focus outward. Second C is for comparisons. Compare yourself either to a time you felt even worse and got through it, or to people coping less well. E is for emotions. Generate opposite emotions, e.g., watch a funny movie if sad. P is for pushing away. Temporarily block the situation from your mind. Set a timer to worry later. T is for thoughts. Force your mind to do something else entirely. Count backwards from 100 by sevens. And S is for sensations. Use intense, non-harmful physical sensations to distract, hold ice, bite a lemon, listen to loud music.
So it's a whole menu of options to get through a tough moment without acting on the urge.
Exactly. It provides concrete steps to delay or ride out the compulsive clinging behavior of OCD, or the impulsive discharge urges of ADHD, or the overwhelming despair of depression. Consistent use of these skills shows around a 72% reduction in problematic impulsive behaviors. It buys you time for your wise mind to come back online. Okay, so we have these powerful therapeutic tools, but the healing doesn't just happen in the therapist's office, does it? It really solidifies through daily integration, making these practices part of life. And a huge piece of that is addressing the trauma that's still held in the body, the stuff that keeps the hypervigilance running.
Right, the somatic piece. How do we work with that?
Approaches like somatic experiencing are fantastic here. SE focuses specifically on helping the nervous system gently release trapped trauma energy, that fight, flight, or freeze response that got stuck on. It does this very gradually through titration and pendulation. And the results can be profound. One study showed 91% of participants reported significant improvement in trauma symptoms, particularly chronic hypervigilance and anxiety, within about 10 SE sessions.
Titration and pendulation. Can you explain those? And is there a daily, accessible, SE-inspired tool someone could use to work with that body activation safely?
Yes. Titration just means working with small, manageable amounts of activation at a time so you don't get overwhelmed. Pendulation is the practice of gently shifting your attention back and forth between a place in your body where you feel activation or distress and a place where you feel relative calm or safety.
Okay. How would that look as a daily practice?
You could do a daily titration practice. Maybe a couple of times a day, you intentionally notice your current level of activation. Let's say you feel tension in your stomach, scattered thoughts. Maybe it's an 8 out of 10 on a stress scale. You just notice that. Then you deliberately scan your body to find even a tiny spot that feels calmer, more grounded, or neutral. Maybe the feeling of your feet solid on the floor, or the warmth of your hands, or just your breath.
Find an anchor.
Exactly. Find an anchor, no matter how small. Then you gently pendulate. Shift your attention briefly to the activated spot, the 8-hand-10 tension. Just notice it. Then immediately shift your attention back to the calm anchor spot. Stay with the calm for a few breaths, then maybe touch back into the activation briefly, then right back to the calm. You repeat this gentle back and forth until you notice the activation level decrease, even by just 1 or 2 points.
So you're teaching the body it can handle the activation and return to safety.
Precisely. You're slowly building the nervous system's capacity to tolerate distress and self-regulate without needing the old extreme strategies of clinging or resisting. It increases your window of tolerance over time.
Brilliant. Okay, let's move to what you call the non-negotiables, those science-backed daily habits that are fundamental for stabilizing the nervous system, especially when dealing with this complex cluster of conditions.
These are foundational. First and foremost, sleep hygiene mastery. We simply cannot overstate this. Poor sleep reliably exacerbates all these conditions: PTSD, OCD, ADHD, depression, often by 40% to 70%.
Wow. So it's the protocol.
Consistency is king. We strongly recommend the 3-2-1 protocol as a non-negotiable starting point. 3 hours before your target bedtime, no more food. Digestion interferes with sleep. 2 hours before bed, no more work or stressful conversations. Let the mind wind down. 1 hour before bed, absolutely no screens, phones, tablets, computers, TV. The blue light massively suppresses melatonin production.
3, 2, 1, no food, no work, no screens.
Right. Combine that consistent routine with optimizing the sleep environment. Keep the room cool, ideally 65-68 degrees Fahrenheit, 18-20 Celsius, and consider using a weighted blanket. The deep pressure touch can be incredibly calming for an anxious nervous system, often reducing primary symptoms by up to 50% when used consistently with good sleep hygiene.
Okay, sleep is huge. What about exercise?
We need an integrated exercise protocol, not just exercising for fitness, but strategically using movement to treat the specific symptoms that are flaring up.
Tailored exercise, how does that work?
We can target the time of day and type of movement. For instance, in the morning, to help with ADHD focus and motivation, about 20 minutes of moderate cardio, like a brisk walk, run, cycling, can significantly boost natural dopamine production and activate the prefrontal cortex, improving executive function.
Okay, cardio for morning focus. What about later?
In the afternoon, if OCD tendencies or general anxiety are high, 15 minutes of slow, mindful movement like yoga, tai chi, or even just gentle stretching can lower cortisol levels and really encourage present moment awareness, interrupting obsessive thought loops.
And evening?
In the evening, especially if depression or low energy is the main issue, a 30-minute walk, preferably in nature if possible, has been shown to increase serotonin, improve mood, and promote better sleep onset later. The overall research is clear. Consistent, appropriate exercise is often as effective as antidepressant medication for mild to moderate depression, showing 60% to 70% improvement rates.
Fantastic. And the role of nutritional psychiatry in stabilizing this whole system. What should people focus on?
This is about giving the brain the building blocks it needs and reducing systemic inflammation, which we know worsens mood regulation and cognitive function. 3 key daily targets. First, high levels of omega-3 fatty acids, specifically EPA and DHA. Aiming for around 2 grams total per day has shown up to a 35% reduction in depression symptoms in some studies. Think fatty fish, algae oil, or high-quality supplements.
Omega-3s. What else?
Second, magnesium, particularly magnesium glycinate or L-threonate forms, which cross the blood-brain barrier more easily. Around 400 milligrams daily can have a significant calming effect, partly by enhancing GABA receptor function, those natural breaks we talked about.
Magnesium for calm. And third,
a potent broad-spectrum probiotic. The gut-brain axis is incredibly sensitive to chronic stress. Supporting a healthy gut microbiome seems to significantly improve mood, reduce anxiety, and even impact cognitive function. Look for high CFU counts and multiple strains.
okay, omega-3s, magnesium, probiotics, foundational support. Finally, you mentioned structure earlier, how the traumatized brain craves predictability, but OCD can twist that into harmful rigidity. How do we provide healthy structure?
That's where social rhythm therapy concepts come in. Regulating daily rhythms, consistent timing for key activities has been shown to reduce mood swings and overall symptoms by about 45% in bipolar disorder, and the principles apply here too. The focus isn't on controlling everything, but on establishing maybe 3 or 4 reliable anchor points in your day.
Anchor points.
Yeah, things that happen at roughly the same time every single day, no matter what. The most important ones are usually wake-up time, the timing of your first meal, your main exercise slot, and your wind-down ritual before sleep. These non-negotiable anchor points provide the predictable structure the brain needs to feel safe, without demanding the pathological, life-shrinking rigidity of OCD compulsions. It's structure with flexibility.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, one last quick technique. For those moments when, despite all best efforts, those old patterns, the urge to check, the impulse to flee, the wave of hopelessness inevitably flare up, what's a quick tool?
A really simple and effective one is the STOP technique. It's designed for immediate de-escalation to create a pause before reacting.
STOP, what does it stand for?
S is for stop. Whatever you're doing, just physically freeze for a moment. T is for take a breath. One slow, deep breath helps interrupt the immediate physiological stress response. O is for observe. Briefly notice what's happening in your body, your thoughts, your feelings, the urge itself. Just observe it without judgment, like a curious scientist. P is for proceed. Now, consciously choose how to proceed based on your values and goals, your wise mind, rather than just reacting automatically based on the urge or emotion.
Stop, take a breath, observe, proceed.
Exactly. That simple sequence interrupts the instant rush to cling or resist. It creates space. And studies suggest using it consistently can prevent emotional or behavioral escalation around 78% of the time. It's a powerful circuit breaker.
Okay. This whole healing journey, working through these layers, integrating these practices, it's clearly not a straight lineup. It's more like a spiral, right? What's a realistic timeline for progress people can expect?
That's so important to emphasize. Be kind and patient with yourself. It is a spiral with ups and downs, but meaningful change is predictable if you're consistent with trauma-focused work and these stabilizing practices. Generally, people might start noticing improvements in sleep quality and a slight reduction in raw physical anxiety within the first couple of weeks.
Okay, 2 weeks for sleep anxiety.
By about 4 weeks, as skills like those from DBT start to take hold, you often see noticeable improvements in emotional regulation, maybe less intense mood swings or faster recovery from upsets.
Month 1, better regulation.
Then, between 6 and 8 weeks, the cognitive shifts from things like CPT often start to become more apparent. Those old stuck points begin to loosen their grip, and behavioral patterns linked to OCD or ADHD might start shifting more noticeably.
Okay, couple of months for cognitive behavioral shifts. Yeah, and longer term.
By month 4 to 6 of consistent effort, new, healthier neural pathways and coping strategies are becoming more established, more automatic. This is often where people report major tangible improvements in their daily functioning, quality of life, and overall sense of well-being. Maybe around 75% report feeling significantly better by this point. But again, it's a process, not a race.
That's really helpful context. Let's end by painting a picture of what success actually looks like. Shifting the perception from managing disorders to reaching a fully integrated state. This isn't about eliminating parts of yourself, is it? It's about evolving those survival strategies into their gifts.
Beautifully put, yes. The intensity doesn't just vanish, it gets channeled consciously. The survivor who once struggled with OCD in this integrated state now channels that incredible attention to detail, conscientiousness, and thoroughness into areas of excellence, maybe in their work, their craft, their relationships. But it comes from a place of care and skill, not terror. They've learned to tolerate, even embrace, the fundamental uncertainty of life with grace.
Wow. And the person whose system was always scanning, the former ADHD pattern.
They learn to harness that incredible energy and intense focus when they choose. They can direct it powerfully towards creative projects, deep learning, passionate connection. They use their high energy productively, but crucially, they also learn that they can rest, be still, be quiet, without the terrifying, deep-seated fear that stillness equals danger or death. They reclaim rest.
And finally, the fully integrated state for the survivor whose system relied on shutdown, the experience of chronic depression.
They hold profound depth without drowning in it. They develop the capacity to access the wisdom, the empathy, the insights often gained through those dark nights of the soul, but without being permanently stuck there. They can feel the full spectrum of human emotion, grief, joy, anger, fear with resilience, without the system needing to collapse into despair as its only option. Their nervous system finally learns it has a whole range of responses available beyond just vigilance, control, or shutdown. It finds flexibility and trust. Hashtag outro.
This has been, well, truly a deep dive. Unpacking the layers, seeing the connections. I think the core takeaway, for me at least, is this powerful reframe. You don't have multiple separate disorders that mean you're somehow uniquely broken.
Yeah.
You have one incredibly adaptive, exquisitely intelligent nervous system that learned multiple complex survival strategies across different developmental stages, all in a profound effort to keep you alive in a world that felt unsafe.
Exactly. And that leads directly to the unified healing pathway. We're not trying to eliminate these responses, the attention to detail, the high energy, the depth of feeling. We're working to evolve them into their healthy, functional, integrated expressions. And the research really does back this up. Integrated trauma-focused approaches consistently show that promise. Often 70% to 80% improvement in the core trauma symptoms, which then leads to 50% to 70% improvement in those secondary conditions like OCD, ADHD, and depression we've discussed today.
Yeah.
Healing the root heals the branches.
So maybe the final thought for you, the listener, is this. Your compound conditions, all those symptoms traveling together, they aren't evidence of how broken you are. They are irrefutable, undeniable evidence of how incredibly hard your system worked, using every tool it could find across every layer of your development just to ensure your survival. That's not pathology. That is sheer brilliance and resilience.
Absolutely.
The question now isn't, how do I fix what's broken? But perhaps, what new integrated strategy, maybe just one 3-minute breathing space today, or one moment of noticing activation and finding a calm spot, just one tiny step, what new strategy will you thank your system for beginning to learn? And alongside that, what one old strategy, maybe one specific pattern of clinging or resisting that no longer serve you, can you gently, compassionately offer permission to rest today? Just start there.